one of America's most prolific serial killers, would brutally murder and mutilate over 30 women in 7 states over a period of 4 years. His name was Ted Bundy.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. Anxiety, filling up every space, no privacy, and silently, it could build and build until you finally see, whoa, it's taking over, damn no closure, moving closer, no exposure, I just wanna...
Ted Bundy was born Theodore Robert Cowell on November 24, 1946, to Eleanor Louise Cowell at the Elizabeth Lund Home for Unwed Mothers. His biological father's identity has never been confirmed. His original birth certificate apparently assigns paternity to a salesman and United States Air Force veteran named Lloyd Marshall, though a copy of it listed his father as unknown. Louise claimed she met a war veteran named Jack Worthington, who abandoned her soon after she became pregnant. Census records revealed that several men by the name of Jack Worthington and Lloyd Marshall lived in the area when Bundy was conceived. Some family members expressed suspicions that Bundy might have been fathered by Louise's own father, Samuel Cowell. However, an arranged DNA test confirmed that Bundy was not the product of incest. For the first 3 years of his life, Bundy lived in the Philadelphia home of his maternal grandparents, Samuel and Eleanor Cowell, who raised him as their son, as to avoid the social stigma that accompanied birth outside of wedlock at that time. Family, friends, and even young Bundy were told that his grandparents were his parents and that his mother was his older sister. He eventually discovered the truth. Although his recollections of the circumstances varied, he told a girlfriend that a cousin showed him a copy of his birth certificate after calling him a bastard, but he told biographers Stephen Michaud and Hugh Ainsworth that he had found the certificate himself. Bundy expressed a lifelong resentment toward his mother for never telling him about his real father and for leaving him to discover his true parentage for himself. Louise changed her surname from Cowell to Nelson in 1950 and moved from Philadelphia with Ted to Tacoma, Washington, to live with cousins Alan and Jane Scott. At an adult singles night at Tacoma's First Methodist Church in 1951, she met Johnny Culpepper Bundy, a hospital cook. Later that year, they married, and Johnny formally adopted Ted. Johnny and Louise had 4 children together, and despite Johnny's efforts to include his adopted son in family activities such as camping trips, Ted remained distant from him. He would later tell a girlfriend that Johnny wasn't his biological father, that he wasn't very bright, and that he didn't make much money. Bundy's memories of Tacoma evolved over time. He described roaming his neighborhood, picking through trash barrels in search of pictures of naked women to Michaud and Ainsworth, and to Polly Nelson. He said he perused detective magazines, crime novels, and true crime documentaries for stories involving sexual violence, especially when the stories were illustrated with pictures of dead or maimed women. However, in a letter to Rule, he stated that he never, ever read fact detective magazines and shuddered at the thought that anyone would, and that he would canvass the community late at night in search of undraped windows where he could observe women undressing or whatever else could be seen. Bundy attended the University of Puget Sound for 1 year after graduating from high school in 1965 before transferring to the University of Washington to study Chinese. In 1967, he began a romantic relationship with a UW classmate, Diane Edwards, identified in Bundy biographies by several pseudonyms, most commonly Stephanie Brooks. Bundy dropped out of college in early 1968 and worked a series of low-wage jobs. He also worked as a volunteer at Nelson Rockefeller's presidential campaign Seattle office and as Arthur Fletcher's driver and bodyguard during Fletcher's campaign for lieutenant governor of Washington state. Bundy attended the 1968 Republican National Convention in Miami as a Rockefeller delegate in August. Edwards ended their relationship soon after and returned to her family's home in California, frustrated by Bundy's immaturity and lack of ambition. Dorothy Otno Lewis, a psychiatrist, later described this crisis as probably the pivotal time in his development. Devastated by the breakup, Bundy traveled to Colorado and then farther east, visiting relatives in Arkansas and Philadelphia and enrolling in Temple University for one semester. It was also around this time in early 1969, according to Rule, that Bundy went to the Burlington Office of Birth Records and confirmed his true parentage. By the fall of 1969, Bundy was back in Washington, where he met Elizabeth Klopfer, a single mother from Ogden, Utah, who worked as a secretary at the UW School of Medicine. Their tumultuous relationship would last long after his initial incarceration in Utah in 1976. Bundy became a father figure to Klopfer's 3-year-old daughter Molly, and he remained in her life until she was 10 years old, after he was arrested. Molly later wrote about incidents when Bundy was abusive or sexually inappropriate with her beginning at the age of 7. Bundy is accused of hitting her in the face, knocking her down, putting her in danger of drowning, indecent exposure, and sexual touching disguised as accidents or games, according to her accounts. Bundy re-enrolled at UW, this time as a psychology major, in the mid-1970s, now more focused and goal-oriented. He was recognized as an honor student by his professors. He began working at Seattle's Suicide Hotline Crisis Center in 1971. There, he met and worked with and Rule, a former Seattle police officer and aspiring crime writer, who would later wrote The Stranger Beside Me, one of the most definitive Bundy biographies. Bundy's personality did not bother Rule at the time. She described him as kind, solicitous, and empathetic. Bundy joined Governor Daniel J. Evans' re-election campaign after graduating from UW in 1972. Posing as a college student, he followed Evans' opponent, former Governor Albert Rossellini, and recorded his stump speeches for Evans' team to analyze. Bundy rekindled his relationship with Edwards during a trip to California on Republican Party business in the summer of 1973. She was astounded by his transformation into a serious and dedicated professional on the verge of a significant legal and political career. Bundy continued to date Klopfer, who was unaware of the other's existence. He enrolled at UPS Law School in the fall of 1973 and continued to court Edwards, who flew to Seattle several times to be with him. They talked about marriage, and he introduced her to Davis as his fiancée at one point. Bundy abruptly cut off all contact with Edwards in January 1974. Her phone calls and letters went unanswered. A month later, when she finally reached him by phone, she demanded to know why he had abruptly ended their relationship without explanation. "Diane, I have no idea what you mean," he said flatly before hanging up. He was never heard from again. "I just wanted to prove to myself that I could have married her," Bundy later explained, but Edwards concluded in retrospect that he had planned the entire courtship and rejection in advance, as vengeance for the breakup she initiated in 1968. Bundy had already begun skipping classes at law school. As young women began to disappear in the Pacific Northwest, he had stopped attending completely by April.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper.